الله على آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. We continue with our beautiful book of Short Salah, Humility in the Prayer by Imam Rajab. May Allah have mercy on him. And today, inshallah, we finish the second third of the book, the second chapter of the book. Next time we start, inshallah, with the third chapter. And we end with a very beautiful statement from one of the righteous predecessors, one of the Salaf. And before we get to this statement, we must understand the importance of these statements of these people from the earlier generations. And the Prophet ﷺ illustrated this in Sahih Bukhari Muslim when he said that the best of people, khayrun nas, qarni, is my generation. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, then the people that follow them. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, then the people that follow them. And in another narration, ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, the fourth generation as well. Then those who follow them. So Islam isn't what this person, there isn't like different understandings of Islam. The correct understanding is the understanding that the earlier generations of Islam were on. So that's where the importance of the statements of the earlier generations comes. Because you see a lot of people, they talk about how the Quran is an open text, for example, or the Sunnah is an open text. I'll understand it how I want. But that's incorrect. We must understand it by the understanding of the earlier generations of Islam, because the Prophet ﷺ said that those were the best of generations. If I don't understand by the understanding of the best of generations, then I'm understanding by the understanding of the worst generations, and that makes no sense at all. And it's like Imam Malik, he said that the later people from this generation will never have their situation better except the same way that the earlier people from this ummah, their situation was better. Now this statement is from a person called Hatim al-Asam. Hatim al-Asam, he lived at the time of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, may Allah have mercy on him. Has a lot of beautiful statements related to fixing the heart, fixing the actions, abandoning worldly matters, and focusing on the afterlife. And this is one of them. Ibn Rajab says that Islam ibn Yusuf, may Allah have mercy on him, passed by Hatim al-Asam, who was talking in his gathering. He asked Hatim, "Have you made your prayer good?" So he replied, "Yes." He asked, "How do you pray?" And this is where the attention should be here. He said, "I stand at the command." So the first thing is, I hear Hayya ala Salah, I stand up. I don't delay it to the end of its time. As soon as I hear the call to prayer, I stand up for the prayer. I stand at the command. I walk in fear. And this meaning has come to us multiple times. The prayer isn't just when I'm standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's also how I come to the prayer as well. It's how I leave the prayer. So one of the meanings we repeated before is that a meaning of khushu', humility, is that you walk on this earth without arrogance. And these slaves of the most merciful are the ones who walk on this earth lightly, calmly, not arrogantly and boastfully. So he walks to the prayer with humility, with fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I commence with the intention. That's the first thing. Before I pray, I must have the proper intention to praise Allah. I perform the takbir, Allahu Akbar, bearing in mind His greatness. So when he says Allahu Akbar, it's not just a word that's on his tongue, but he also understands Allah is greater. And here, one of the meanings in the prayer is very beautiful, which is that if we focus on this statement, a lot of the difficulties that we have in this world, that will become much smaller than they are. Allahu Akbar, Allah is greater. We think of a difficulty that we're facing outside of the Salah. Remember, Allah is greater than that difficulty. That difficulty becomes smaller. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah. O you who believe, seek Allah's help through patience and through prayer. I always like to remember or mention, when I mention this ayah and this meaning, that Allahu Akbar should be one of the ways I relieve the difficulties of life. The prayer isn't the difficulty itself. It's one of the ways I relieve the difficulties of life. I recall always a story that from the life of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. His son Salih, he says in his biography of his father, that when he was on the way to Al-Mu'tasim, when he was about to be tortured, for holding on to the statement of the people of Hadith, that the Quran is the words of Allah, unlike the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila said. So he's on the way, and right before he gets to the Khalifa, he's on an animal, and on this animal, they don't put him, first they have his hands, right, shackled, and they don't put him properly on the animal, right? So he's moving left and right. He says, I'm about to fall off of the animal. And it's a very difficult journey for him. And then when he gets to his destination at night, what is the first thing he's going to ask for? He's going to ask for water. So he can ask for food. Maybe he wants a bed to rest on. No. He says, first, I want water. What does he want the water for? He makes wudu with that water and he starts praying it. So this is an application of how a person seeks Allah's help through the prayer, through the difficulties that he is going through. So, Hatim says, I perform the takbir bearing in mind his greatness. And this helps a person relieve the difficulties of life that he is going through. I recite at a measured pace, carefully and with contemplation. The Prophet ﷺ, they described his recitation, he would recite the Quran, you could count the letters because he would recite slowly, not rushing through the ayahs. And he said with contemplation, focusing on the meanings of the ayat. He says, I bow with khushu'. We talked about that before, that khushu' is one of the great displays of humility. I prostrate in meekness, the sujood in subservience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I sit and I read the whole tashahhud, and then I perform salam in accordance to the sunnah. So it's not just about the actions of the heart, but the outside also must be in accordance with the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I pray with sincerity to Allah Mighty and Magnificent, repeating the matter of the intention. That in my heart I should only be praying for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High. And yet, despite him saying that I fix my intention, he says, and yet I fear that it will not be accepted of me. And Allah praised this meaning when he said, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْتُونَ مَا آتَوْا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ وَجِلَةٌ. Those who give whatever they give. They give a lot for the sake of Allah, sacrifice a lot, but their hearts are still trembling. Why? Because they're afraid the action might not be accepted because of the bad thing that I did, because of an imperfection in the prayer itself. But what happens when I'm not sure that it's accepted from me? I'm afraid of it being unaccepted. Hatim says, however, I will preserve it as much as I can until I die. I'm not sure if it was accepted. I hope Allah accepts it. I continue doing actions after it. I never know which action is going to be the one. I'm guaranteed paradise because of that. And then the response of the person that asks him about the prayer after he finishes describing his prayer is so beautiful, because a lot of times we get really bored, even if this is 5 minutes, a little more. We get really bored of talk about things that don't have something of excitement, right? That he always talks about how social media is based on what excited you, right? 5 seconds, then you flip. 5 seconds, then you flip. But here, Islam, because he was really enjoying how he's talking about these beautiful meanings related to Salah, he said, keep talking, for you have indeed excelled in your prayer. And of course, when the person like me is speaking, of course you're going to get bored. Like when we're talking about what the meanings, the proper meanings, that deserve for the person to pay attention and to enjoy reading and listening about that. So, jazakumullahu khairan for your time. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa iyyakum.